This is the I Love Success podcast. I'm Peter Jarboh, and I have made a vow to myself to help as many people as possible to achieve their dreams. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to the I Love Success podcast. Let's talk about relationships. I believe that relationships can be one of the hardest things we get to experience in life. But if we can have amazing relationships, life is incredible, right? So in order to help you, I brought in AJ Harbinger, the co-founder of the Art of Charm podcast. He has dedicated his whole life to help people have better relationships. So kick back, relax, and learn from this amazing human being. Let's welcome AJ Harbinger.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you here. I mean, you have such a wealth of knowledge, but I'm curious about you and who are this man, AJ?
Well, growing up, a single father raised me, and I'm very introverted and struggled putting together some of the social skills that are necessary to build your social capital, grow your network. And when I got to graduate school, I was struggling with some imposter syndrome and not really connecting with my classmates. I felt like in college I had that magic and I kind of lost it when I got to graduate school. And as an introvert, not having resources to develop these skills as a kid was scary and frustrating. So I really dug deep into the science of trying to figure out how to make a great first impression, how to connect with people, knowing that not only does hard work matter to your success, but also who you know. And deep down, I'm still an introvert. I tell all of my clients that we work with, and they're a little shocked, obviously, because the success of the podcast and the coaching services that we provide, talking about social skills. But socializing does drain me. I like quiet time. I like to be by myself. Personally, I enjoy golf. I love entrepreneurship and helping other entrepreneurs succeed and building relationships, quality relationships.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we all struggle with. So I'm super excited for this episode. Can we just go back to, so you grew up with just your dad?
Yeah.
How was that? And did you yearn for a mother figure? How has that shaped you as a man,
Absolutely. So unfortunately, growing up, my mom was abusive. So my dad won custody of me and my sister, and I was in the second grade when that happened. And of course, growing up in the 80s, divorce was not as big as it is now. And most families, unfortunately, if there was a divorce, the mom got the children.
Yeah.
So in grade school, I remember being confronted with, small things like the teacher saying, hey, take this permission slip to your mom, make sure she signs it. And I didn't have a mom to have the permission slip signed. So, it was a little difficult connecting, relating to my classmates who had a nuclear family. My dad was a blue collar guy. He was in the Navy, didn't go to college, and he was all about putting in long hours and hard work. And because of his lack of education, he really pushed me and my sister to get a great education. And I'm forever grateful for that. But it definitely was a challenge connecting with classmates who had a mom at home. I was fortunate in that my dad's sister, my aunt, stepped into that role to help support my dad with him working, and my grandma as well. So I did have female role models and figures in my life, but it wasn't a classic mom relationship. So it was certainly something that I feel didn't always set me up for success as I got into high school and college. And unfortunately, now having worked with clients all over the world and talking about these things, there are a lot of children that are dealing with that are being raised by single parents who don't often have a father figure or a mother figure in their life, and they're sort of struggling.
Yeah, they certainly do, and we want to help those people because it's not your fault, right? As a kid, you can't choose that. So I'm curious, did you have this shape? Have you had a harder time trusting women because of this in your life? Or can we just talk about that?
Absolutely. The big thing for me was realizing that in the mistake that my dad made in choosing the woman to marry and build a family with, that it had a huge impact on my life, and it did make me a little hesitant and timid around women, of course, and a little, judging of myself, like, can I have happiness and find that connection? And that's what really led to the start of this company, The Art of Charm, and the podcast was my exploration in building social skills and finding the right partner, because that really is the most important decision you'll make in your life, and having someone to have your back, support you. So it certainly clouded my judgment in my teens and in my 20s, and I had to work through a lot of that. But on the flip side of it, I think it's brought me a unique perspective in that I have had a very strong relationship with my father growing up, and he was supportive in my academic endeavors and in my sports. And with that, I feel like it built the grit and the hard work that's necessary, right, to talk about success.
Yeah.
But where I was lacking was in the social skills and the relating to others department that I feel like held me back. Yeah. And that's really been our core mission, knowing that, a lot of these soft skills that we're talking about, conversation, connection, they're not taught in schools classically. There is no roadmap given to children, and you're kind of forced into it, and it's sink or swim. And sometimes that creates this dynamic where you feel like either you were born with it or you weren't. And for those of us who feel like they weren't born with it, well, where do you find those resources? And that's really why we created The Art of Charm.
That's awesome. And I'm in a little bit, I'm going to tell like how I got into all of this. It's the same thing. I had a trouble with, attracting girls. But first I just want to talk about, you pursue this education. Can you just talk about what education you pursued, and at what point you kind of decided that, no, I want to master relationships, because that's pretty awesome,
Yeah, so growing up, I always had an aptitude for science. I loved encyclopedias. I memorized an almanac around animals and mammals. So I was always just exploring science, and my dad, obviously being very big on education, was happy to put encyclopedias in front of me. And as I got to high school, I thought, okay, I'm going to get on a pre-med track. I'm going to be a doctor. I want to help patients and help people. And I got to college, was doing pretty good in school, enjoying it, and I had a sit down with my career counselor at the time, and I was thinking about, okay, I want to apply to great med schools. What do I have to do to get my application to be someone who's a great candidate? And she said to me, you need a story, you need a why that you're doing this, right? It sounds to me, even in listening to you, that a lot of it is to get obviously your family's approval and win over your dad, but you need a greater why, especially going into interviews for medical school. And she really suggested that I get a job at a hospital. Yeah. And this was my first real job that was in a corporate setting, very professional environment, in a hospital. And of course, working in an emergency room, you see a lot of trauma. You see a lot of chaos. And I started to meet doctors and medical staff and nurses who were struggling in their career and unhappy with modern medicine and the way it's structured, so that it's more of a business, and sometimes the patients suffer because of that. And I was working in a hospital that was on the border of Detroit and a suburb. So we had a lot of patients coming in who didn't have health insurance, who, because of that lack of health insurance, didn't get the same care as those patients who had insurance. And for me, that was sort of eye-opening, right? I thought, oh, you take the Hippocratic Oath and you just try to treat and help everyone. Yeah. But the business of medicine, the hospital has to make money. Yeah. So what I realized then was, maybe medicine isn't quite the career for me. Yeah. In dealing with doctors and staff who are unhappy and frustrated with their life, and then feeling myself a little torn about it, I told my dad I want to take a break after graduating from college and potentially travel through Europe. I had some friends in college do that, and I felt like I was kind of left out of that. And in that gap year, my dad pushed me to get another job because he wasn't going to support me any longer, being a single dad, blue-collar guy. So in him pushing me to get another job, and I had this biology background, I was like, all right, research. And it was my first real job in research, doing experiments, hands-on work, working with mice, and I was doing a head and neck cancer stem cell model that we were chasing after about 14 years ago now. And threw myself into it, hard work, and was so excited to get the results published, to prove to my dad that I didn't just spend the summer wasting time, and to earn some money to travel, of course. And when we went to publish, we actually got scooped by a group at Stanford. And this was the first time I'd ever heard that term, scooped. I thought, you do the work, you get the results, you publish. Well, science doesn't work that way. It's still about relationships. And our lab that I worked in, we didn't really have a huge name in the cancer research space. My boss was just a physician. He was starting out his career in research as well. So we didn't have a name attached to the research to really help us get published in a great journal. And here Stanford had that lead researcher who was famous, who had the connections and had friends on the editing board of numerous journals. So when they went to publish before us, there was an internal battle of like, hey, we need to get these results published. And being scooped would mean our results wouldn't see the light of day. So my boss pushed really hard to get those research results published. And in doing so, I lost some of the credit that I was hoping to receive from all the hard work. And I remember feeling very frustrated by this. And my boss pulled me aside and said, this is part of science. I wish it was different. It is about who you know, and it is about your relationships as much as it is about results. And that for me was eye-opening. Like, wow, okay, relationships are just as important as hard work. And in my frustration, my boss said, hey, have you considered graduate school? You were doing these experiments for a year and a half, getting results that were publishable in a journal. That's graduate school level work. And I think if you enrolled in graduate school, worked on a PhD, you might find that that is the ticket for you, since you're a little nervous around modern medicine. And I thought about it. I talked to my dad, and obviously it would allow me to get a doctor before my name. So my dad was gung-ho about it. And I ended up starting graduate school at Michigan. So I went to undergrad at University of Michigan. I went to graduate school, and my boss helped me get into the graduate school. When I got to graduate school, though, it was a totally different experience for me. College, I had a lot of great friends, and my social network was pretty solid. Graduate school, especially graduate students, they're a little bit older, they're a little more settled. In fact, some of them had families already, and they were gung-ho about science. They had published numerous articles, and they had wanted to be PhDs, some of them their whole life. Wow. And it was the first time for me I felt, okay, I'm not really connecting with people like I thought either. And I started to get some feedback in the lab that people felt I was cold, standoffish, but internally I was having this imposter syndrome and struggling to find confidence. And that's what really led me down this rabbit hole of researching first impressions, connection, how to have more charismatic conversations. And what sprung out of that was this podcast 12 years ago as a bit of a hobby. And as that podcast grew in popularity, our listeners were begging us essentially for coaching and help and support in growing their own skills. And that's really when I realized, hey, there's an actual business opportunity here. And I found myself in the lab doing the experiments, but thinking about the podcast and thinking about this mission. And so excited to run home and work and stay up late all night, emailing people, trying to get guests on the podcast, connecting and building out curriculum for our courses. And that's when I said, wait a second, am I in graduate school to make my dad happy? Or is this really driving personal happiness, joy, purpose, meaning for me? And at that point, I told my dad that I was going to drop out of graduate school. And he was very frustrated. It was 3 years into my PhD. My research was just towards my thesis was just starting to take off. I had a thesis committee meeting that didn't go as well as I'd hoped. And that was really the crossroads for me in my career to say, hey, are you in this for the right reasons or not? And I made the decision to leap into podcasting and build out a coaching company 12 years ago. And as scary as that was, I'm really happy that I decided to pick up that journey and mission.
That's awesome. And I mean, even today, if you say, I'm going to start a podcast, I'm going to build a coaching business, people like, what is that? But I mean, 12 years ago, what did your dad, did he even know what a podcast was? And like, how did this work out?
It's so funny because podcasting has grown in popularity. Obviously, Serial, wildly successful. And we've now hit a place where, almost 40%, 50% of the population listens or is at least engaged with the podcast. And at that time, no one was doing it. We were doing it in my basement in Ann Arbor. And we had to turn off the furnace to record so we wouldn't get the buzz from the furnace. And, we had no idea audio quality, mics, all the extra stuff that went into it, but we just went in and had great, fun conversations, and the audience enjoyed it. And we shared our personal journey along the way. And what ended up happening is as the podcast started to gain in some popularity, we got featured on the homepage of iTunes. And that really gave us hockey stick-like growth in terms of listenership. And that's when I started to get really excited and share this with my dad. And my dad was like, what are you doing? I don't understand this at all.
Yeah.
And of course for him, especially since it was built largely around dating and being raised strict Catholic, my dad was very confused as to why I would take my science knowledge and my analysis and my love of research and throw it at something like that, like attracting women and being more charismatic. And for him, it was a totally foreign concept. And I'll be honest, he wasn't proud to share it with friends and family members. In fact, it was kind of a secret in my extended family and in my friends of our family that I was still doing research while I had already dropped out of graduate school and moved to New York. So it was difficult for my dad and family to really deal with. And even to this day, there's still a little hesitancy around being an entrepreneur and whether or not this is truly the best career for me to be in. And here we are 12 years later. I've had a Sirius XM radio show. We've been published and we've worked, as you said, with thousands of clients. And corporations come to us and ask for this training. So it is a little jarring, to have family who's still a little cautious and concerned about it. And then on the flip side, have people view us as, wildly successful.
Yeah, but I mean, that's kind of part of the process, right? I truly believe that's only the universe always asking, how bad do you fucking want it in a way, And you're gonna get those things all the time if you want to do something extraordinary, which you guys already have done. And I'm sure you're not even close to done with what you guys are doing, right?
Doubt is always a part of it.
Yeah.
Always a part of it. Even 12 years in, there's still going to be moments of self-doubt and questioning, and there's going to be ups and downs whenever you're growing and running a business. And, I've been fortunate enough to be doing it for 12 years and have had great mentors and advisors over the years to really help me through those doubts and through that, sometimes harsh criticism that I throw on myself and the company for not being as far ahead as we'd like. But the flip side of that is really the core mission of changing people's lives through allowing them to develop their emotional intelligence and their social skills to have meaningful connections. And one thing we talk about on the show so much is how, these devices in our pocket are stealing our attention and they're actually removing our ability to connect in person with people. And that's the battle that we want to fight. We want to allow people to turn off the phone and connect in person.
Yeah, that's why I love podcasting, because this is, when do you get this, that you can sit with someone and just talk and share? It's amazing. And just to kind of, I want to go into emotional intelligence now, because I don't think a lot of people even know what it is. And so maybe you can help us define it. But like kind of my backstory, I was this little chubby kid that was bullied. And then I got skinny because I worked out a lot. And I started to get good at karate, which gave me a little bit of confidence, but I couldn't talk to the girls and they weren't interested in me at all. So my friend showed me this book called The Game, which you probably read. And that was like the first step for me in like saying, okay, there's a different world out there. But then I realized that the game only works for like a minute or two, but then you have to have your own real inner game. You have to be interesting. You have to have a passion. You have to be able to be funny authentically and really want these relationships. And that's why I'm here today, so many years later, read so many books, meeting people like you to learn and to share. And now I feel much more confident in like talking to the opposite sex and this whole journey. So can we just share like what is emotional intelligence and how can you work on that?
Absolutely. So emotional intelligence for us is really twofold. It's understanding and managing your own emotions. And for a lot of us, our emotions wore on our sleeve and they're tied to our identity, and our fears drive and motivate us sometimes in directions we don't want to go. So the first thing is understanding your own emotions, being more mindful and conscious of those reactive moments, because in those reactive moments, you're actually pushing people away or repelling them. The other side of the coin is understanding someone else's emotional state and allowing them to feel comfortable with you and manage their own emotions. So a lot of this is our nonverbal communication. So when it comes to our own body language, being more comfortable and confident, not allowing those stresses and anxieties to show outwardly. And the flip side is being able to read other people's nonverbal communication and their cues to allow you to see what emotions they're feeling, what they're afraid of, and how to manage those emotions. So for us, a lot of it is not just looking internally. And I know, with anxiety, especially around social anxiety, we turn inward and we focus on how we're feeling and how we're being perceived and how we're being judged. True emotional intelligence is allowing you to get outside of just yourself and understand that, one, as we talked about, a lot of people are feeling the same thing, having the same doubts, the same anxieties, and two, being able to read their emotional state so that it's not something that's a black box for you, so that you don't know what the other person's feeling, because we connect emotionally. We don't connect through logic and facts. As much as we would love to think that, we don't. And all that we talk about on the show is crafting your own personal narrative and your story that is essentially your movie, that you're the star in, and allowing you to communicate that story to others, and then engaging in their story and understanding them at a deeper level is what we mean by emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And so let's just, for an example, we have a guy out there, they're very successful in their career, they've been struggling real hard to make everybody happy all their life, but they struggle with relationships. They don't have good relationships. What's the first step to kind of start working on that?
Well, I think what a lot of our clients who come to our programs and work with us in a coaching capacity realize is that at a certain point in your career, your aptitude and your skill level matters less than your ability to connect and lead and motivate your team. Yeah. And as we move up the corporate ladder, it becomes less about our specific role and more about managing a team and leading them. And that's really where that emotional intelligence component comes in. For the guys who are struggling with relationships, the first thing that you actually brought up that is so important is understanding that we have to develop our own personality and passions and purpose first before we start running out and trying to be needy and trying to seek out these connections to make us whole. So for a lot of us, it means figuring out a pursuit. Sometimes it's in your career, sometimes it's outside of your career, that motivates you, gets you excited, and is something that you're willing to share with others. Yeah. The second part of that, and this is the scary part, is being more vulnerable, right? A lot of us are perfectionists. We want to be the best version of ourselves. And because social media has really only incentivized you to publish the best version of yourself, your highlight reel, we often do not share the vulnerable moments, the moments we're struggling in, the moments that make us real for someone else. So what ends up happening in our experience with clients who are struggling in those relationships is they're struggling to listen to the other person and listen on an emotional level, and they're struggling to be vulnerable and allow that other person to see them wholly instead of just this amazing version of myself, this Superman, so to speak.
Yeah. So how do you get out there? You're super introverted, but you want to talk to women or women with guys and whatever it is. It doesn't matter. How do you get out there and do that?
The easiest conversations are going to be the conversations where there is a shared interest and a commonality. That doesn't mean that means it creates connection, which is a misnomer, and we can dive into that a little bit. Yeah. But the easiest conversations for someone who's introverted is with someone else who has a shared interest. Yeah. So we could talk for hours, days about podcasting, right? Because we both are passionate about podcasting. So for those of you who are struggling with this introversion and want to put yourself out there, start working on developing a new skill, seeking out an interest, and sometimes you don't even know what that is, so try a bunch of different things. I have clients take dancing lessons, guitar lessons, learn the piano, learn a new language, a cooking class, but learning new skills and the pursuit of learning those skills opens up social opportunities that have that little connection built in where you have a common interest. So you're at a meetup group together, maybe it's an entrepreneurship meetup group or a real estate investing meetup group, where you have that common interest and those conversations happen a little easier. They're a little more organic. And that gives you an ample opportunity to practice all the skills that we cover on the podcast. How to be a better listener, how to start the conversation, and how to take the conversation deep so it's not just boring small talk. So to set yourself up for success, to practice these skills is creating safe environments with shared interests so that you can showcase your passions and be a little more comfortable. And then we want to work to get more and more outside of that comfort zone. Yeah. So the second layer of that is now starting to engage everyone you interact with on a daily basis. So that's Lyft drivers, that's the barista, that's the clerk at the grocery store, that's the person on the bus next to you, right? Again, as we talked about, our attention's being sucked into this device.
Yeah.
And many of us are walking around with AirPods, hopefully listening to our podcasts, but we're not often looking for those little moments to connect. And it just takes practicing, starting the conversation to get your feet wet, to get some wins under your belt, and then we'll build up to approaching the opposite sex and nailing that first impression. Yeah. But for a lot of us who are a little less social than we'd like to be, maybe our job requires us to speak more to computers than to humans, we like to say, then we need to start in a safe environment where there is a shared interest so that the conversation sparks a little easier for you.
And do you start with like a script or something in the beginning just to feel comfortable, or like what's the first step? Because I know some people they just to go to someone is like a huge thing for them, you know?
So we have a simple conversation formula that we teach, and essentially it's a little math equation that we love. A lot of our clients, as you can imagine, are a little analytical, and that analysis has been rewarded in their career. They've become very successful for their analysis, but that analysis doesn't serve us when we're trying to connect in a conversation. So the conversation formula is simply ask someone a question. Now, the nuance is we don't want the question to be a yes or no question. We want the question to be like, how'd you hear about this event? What brought you here today? Oh, who do you know at this event? So it creates a space and an opportunity for the other person to share, and it's using your curiosity to spark that conversation. Now, here's where the important part happens. They're going to give us an answer to the question. We have to listen to that answer from a nonverbal perspective, what's going on with their facial expressions, what's going on with their body language, as well as the words. And then the way we relate to them is in the form of a statement. So the third step in the formula, we ask the question, we listen to their answer. Step number 3 is we actually say something about ourselves. Oh, I've never met that person, or this is my first time coming to this event. I just found it on Meetup. Whatever that disclosure is, we want it to be a statement. And that breaks us out of the question train, where we're just interviewing the other person. We're not adding anything to the conversation. And at the end of it, the person feels a little defensive because they're like, why is this guy asking me so many questions? I don't know anything about him. He's a complete stranger to me. So that formula we use on the street, we use at a networking event, we even use socially if we're trying to talk to women. And it's not about memorizing, it's about understanding the frame that conversation happens when both parties are adding. And questions, as humans, we are wired to answer others' questions because we are a community-based species. Our survival depends on it. So even if we're walking down the street, I was coming up here in Santa Monica on the street and someone asked me for directions. And I was in my phone trying to look up the address here to get your contact information. And still, just that question pulled me out of my phone and I said, I'm not actually very familiar with Santa Monica. I don't spend much time on the west side. I think it's this way. And you'll find that people are wired to respond to your questions first. So those are the easiest icebreakers, are simple questions that are not yes/no questions, but allow the other person to just share a little something.
That's awesome. And on the other hand, let's talk about those people that attract the wrong people in their life. How do you change that? Let's say you're an alpha male and always attract party girls, or you're a party girl and always attract those bad guys, or whatever it might be. Like, how do you shift that perspective? Because that's also a thing that a lot of people are struggling with, and we don't talk about that much, right? Because we think they got it, but not always, right?
So, growing up, my dad used to take me and my sister up to our uncle's lake house up north in Michigan. And we'd go out fishing with my uncle and we'd drop the line in and wait for a few bites. And then, if there's not a few bites or if the fish are small, we'd go to a different part of the lake. A lot of us don't realize that we're getting the same results because we're only focusing on things in the same environment. So if you find yourself attracting toxic people or people that are not a good fit for you, the first thing to do is change your environment where you're meeting people. And be thoughtful about this, right? Whether it's a partner or a friend, think about what are the personality traits and qualities that you would like to have in your relationship from someone else. Then, after you have those qualities, think about, okay, if someone had those qualities, where would they be likely to hang out? Would they be going to nightclubs and partying, or would they be going to the gym to work out? Or would they be going to that meetup group to get that education? Or would they be going to an entrepreneur event to work on their networking? So first you understand what are the qualities of the person I'd like to attract into my life, whether platonically or romantically, and then change where you're fishing, right? Start fishing where those quality people are and start creating opportunities to connect there. That will first and foremost change and break you out of that pattern that's frustrating you right now. The second thing is oftentimes we attract what we're putting out there. So it does take some self-reflection. Are there some negative, needy behaviors that you're exhibiting? And we call these low-value behaviors. And I'll give you 3 examples. The first low-value behavior is supplicative. And supplicative, and to supplicate, is the please like me mentality. You'll change your answer because you don't want to offend the other person, or you don't want them to view you negatively or disagree with you. So you're always agreeable. You're like, yeah, I love that too. Oh, karate, I love karate too. Oh, yeah, Sweden, I've been to Sweden. And you're just always trying to please the other person. That's actually a low-value behavior, and that's going to attract low-value people into your life. The second low-value behavior we talk about in our bootcamp courses and on the podcast is someone who is combative. Someone who's looking for the fight, the argument, who's looking to challenge people. That combative behavior, and sometimes in the alpha male setting, you'll see this, and it's physical, right? Yeah. It's like shouting and it's an altercation. Sometimes when we get frustrated and we don't think about it, we are in that low value state. We are being combative with other people, which again is going to attract the wrong type of person to us. The third low value state that a lot of us may not even think is low value because it has rewarded us in our life is competitive. And this is the one-upper. This is like, oh, nice watch, that was my last one. Or, oh, I love your shirt, I just got rid of it. Or, oh, you went to that school, well, I went here. Oh, you had your honeymoon here, well, we went here. And just that one-upmanship, right? Always looking for that edge to compete constantly may help you in your career, may help you on the sports field, may help you in the dojo, but it's not gonna help you in connecting with other people. And there are moments that these behaviors will present themselves. I'm not saying that every situation you're supplicative, or every situation you're combative, or even every situation you're competitive. But oftentimes, if you're attracting the wrong people, there's a trigger that's creating this behavior in you, and these are what you're exhibiting to others that's bringing in the wrong people. High-value people who we strive to be are cooperative. They're people who look to support others first, not look to one-up. They look to give, whether it's time, resources, connections, to others. And they're not looking for what they get in return. And that's what we need to strive for, is to be more cooperative. The more cooperative you are, the more you're going to attract high-value people into your life and remove those people of low value.
I love that. And I also think when we talk about these high values, I try and aim to be that person every day. But I remember when I started that shift from low value to high value, sometimes I had limiting beliefs that people would take advantage of me, that this is not the right way. People would see me as weak, but now I see that it's the opposite. So what do you want to say to people that have those limiting beliefs that people will take advantage of them if they're too kind or giving or like those kind of things?
That will always be the case, and I'm not saying be a doormat. Yeah. There are always going to be low-value people who look to get something from your cooperativity and your giving mindset. That should never guard you from stopping to be generous or stopping to give, but we want to be smart in who we let in and who we let out. Yeah. And I really have a 3 strikes policy. You know, growing up watching the Detroit Tigers, for me, you know, and listen, there will be moments where I get stressed and I'm low value and I'm combative because someone cut me off in the car, right? So everyone gets a first strike, you know, it happens. Second strike, okay. Third strike, it starts to tell me something about your character. So if I feel that you've taken advantage of me 3 times, I'm going to withdraw from the relationship. I'm not going to give you my time and my resources. And in my mind, 3 is a great opportunity for that person to show you their real character. And that allows you to not be judgmental and turn people away and just focus on, you know, what you have and not giving. But you also have to understand, and this is the thing, along the last 12 years, you know, I've had some bad relationships. I've had some bad business relationships with partners that did not end well. But I still feel the sum total of the 12 years that I've been able to get here through our generosity, our willingness to come on other shows, support other people in their mission, welcome them on our show. And that always, again, and this is something that Gary Vee talks about a lot too, and he's gone big on generosity, which I love. This is not a short-term thing. This is a long game, right? This is a marathon we're running. This is your life. And when people look back on their life, they don't look back on the person who took a little bit from them or the person who took advantage. They look back fondly on all the gifts that they've been able to give other people.
No, I totally agree with you. And people that are on your frequency, they want to help. Like I noticed that with my podcast. Like I said, I'm going to start a podcast about a couple of years ago because I loved Brian Rose on London Real. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And I didn't know anything or anyone. But I just made a commitment. I'm going to ask people, do you want to come and share? And it's so rare that people say no.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like every day it blows my mind. Like I was having coffee. This morning I went up early, went to the gym, listened to The Art of Charm.
Love it.
And then just like had a coffee. And I was just thinking like, I'm going to go and share a deep conversation with a man that's been sitting with almost 800 people, and just learn how blessed am I? And then I was just saying, why does he want to come here? Because we are probably on the same frequency,
Absolutely.
And so I just want to talk about like all these people you have met. Can you just share how has that shaped you as a human being? Because I see myself by doing this is 134th, just like it's changed my life completely to the positive,
Well, there are certainly patterns in behavior that you pick up on in other successful people that I think are difficult at times for us to grasp in our 20s. But the more you understand these habits and how these habits become behaviors that shape your character and ultimately lead to your success, it unlocks a different worldview. So, for example, in all the interviews that we've had on the last 12 years and the successful people that have been on the show, self-discipline and routine is a bottom line runs throughout everyone's life because there are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be highs and lows in everyone's journey. But it is the discipline to not let the lows take you too low and the highs take you too high that allow you to create a space for success. And a lot of us need to realize that our morning habits are what set us up for that success or failure each and every day. And in my 20s, especially starting this company, taking clients out, working with them, there were long nights. There were nights of partying and staying up late. And I always thought, I'm just a night owl. Like, I don't need to get up early to be successful. But everyone we were having on the show was like, no, what you do to start your day sets the tone for everything else you do. And over time, especially here in my 30s now, I've realized the importance of that. Going to the gym in the morning, setting your alarm clock so that you're up at 5 to get that extra hour of quiet time, to get some writing in, to get some meditation done, and then answering emails, and then diving into everything else you have to do. That's something that I've learned from my guests. The second thing that I've learned is exactly your point, their generosity. I sit there and pinch myself like, why does he want to come on our show? Why does he want to share this with us? But successful people are generous people. They understand that sharing their resources and sharing their journey can help others. And they also understand that the more supportive they are of others, the more that support comes back double to them. And those are two real important things. The third is relationships. Every success story, there's a relationship behind it that propelled it forward. It's that who you know. And sometimes you got to beat the door down. Sometimes you got to find the back door. Sometimes you got to find someone else who even knows where the door is. But keep trying, and when those relationships develop, more doors and opportunities open for you than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, I was thinking when you said this with doors, what's the craziest thing you guys have done to get a guest on the show?
So this is actually pretty funny. When we started the show, we were recording in my basement, as I said, and it was late nights. So get home from graduate school, get dinner in, and then go downstairs. And we were drinking gin and tonics back then on the show to get a little loosened up. Because as you know, your first few episodes, you're staring at the mic's staring at you, and you're like, what do I say? What do I do? So after the show was done and we hit pause, stop, go to export, we'd turn on the TV, and it was Dog the Bounty Hunter. It was just this trashy TV show that we would watch after recording. And my dad watched the show too. So it became this thing of like, we got to get Dog on the show. And we tried through PR, we tried through the TV producers and through everyone who worked on his show, got nowhere. So finally we decided, what if we just call his office in Hawaii and pretend we need bail? We need a bail bondsman because we're in trouble. And sure enough, they picked up. They thought we were a potential customer. And we went through a little bit of, we're having this issue. We're like, all right, actually, now that we're speaking with you, Dog, we would love to have you on our show. 15 minutes of your time, super simple. You're a big hero of ours. And at first he was a little like taken aback, like, why are you wasting my time? But he could hear our genuine, like, please come on the show. We would love this opportunity. And he said, okay, talk to my son. We'll set up 15 minutes. And we were ecstatic. And then we started to worry, like, maybe we pissed him off. Maybe that's not going to work. A week later, he calls. Him and his wife are on. And we have 15 minutes to rap with him about his personal journey. And I remember the second we hit stop on that episode, I sent it over to my dad. And I was like, listen to this. Yeah. And he was just like, what are you doing talking to Dog the Bounty Hunter? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And I was like, well, this was something that for us was that relaxing moment after the podcast was recorded. So we went after it and we tried, as I said, the front door. We tried through some other relationships, got nowhere. And then we just said, let's just go directly and call his business and see how it goes. And it ended up clicking. And a lot of the big name guests at this point have come through our network in building that social capital. You know, a warm connection, a loose tie, who knows that person, who can at least say, hey, you know, an hour spent with AJ and Johnny is worth your time, goes a long way versus the cold emailing approach. So that has been a big strategy of ours, is to try to grow our network and our social capital so that we're at least close enough that we get that warm introduction.
That's awesome. And I mean, but you got to start somewhere. You got to hustle in the beginning, right?
And there are a lot of no's. Like, don't get me wrong. You know, people look at the show and they're like, oh, you're almost at 800 episodes. It must be so easy for you now. But there's still a lot of no's. There are a number of people that we have been chasing to get on the show who don't go on a lot of podcasts, who in fact a lot of people don't know about. They're clinicians and they're deep in the science and the research and the psychology behind connection, communication. And much like my dad, telling them, hey, I want you to come on my podcast. They're like, I don't have time for that. So I want people to realize that even though we've been doing this 12 years, we still get no's. Like, we've been chasing a Dr. John Gottman, who we think is just a genius when it comes to deep connections with your significant other and spouse. And he teaches this concept of emotional bids that we covered in depth on our show. And it's been no. And finally, we started talking to his licensed therapist that he works with, and we're going to have one of them on the show and hope that that goes well, and then, you know, work your way up the food chain so that you can get those big guests that you're chasing. Yeah,
that's awesome. And I mean, one thing that I have seen is that sometimes I enjoy more sitting down with someone who doesn't have done a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
Because I'm curious, like, from a personal perspective, how do you do to get great conversations with people that have done 100, 200 podcasts before? Because a lot of times it's like the same, it's autopilot, you know. What's Absolutely. Your strategy to do that?
So, and we tell the guests before the show, you know, we are not a podcast that's driven by their personal story or their biography or their background. There are a number of shows who do it way better than us and who are even better interviewers than us. You know, we are very specific that we want our content to be geared around connection and understanding relationships, and we want it to be actionable. And through that conversation, we'll pull out some of those stories and nuggets, but we're not doing a traditional podcast where we ask, okay, where were you born? Tell me a little bit about your childhood. So that alone has allowed us to not fall down that rabbit hole of just the same conversation that they've had over and over again. We had Jay Shetty on the show, and there was a lot of prep that went into that, and a lot of digging through his early videos and really digging into the psychology around putting out content, facing the judgment, and knowing that, people are going to view what you just put out into the world, that's your baby, sometimes negatively, and sometimes just give you all of this hate. And how do you deal with that self-doubt around creating something? And, he stopped in the interview and was like, that's a great question. I haven't faced that before. So a lot of it also is the research. And we have a phenomenal researcher, Michael Harold, who you were listening to at the gym this morning, who works with us. And he delves deeply into the science to help us out on that, as well as what we try to do is consume some of their best content. So, digging through the first few pages of Google, looking at the interviews and saying, okay, was there something that they discussed that maybe, we can connect off of? And that's typically how we find those magic moments of, oh, I've never had that question before, or, oh, wow, I'm so excited to be talking about this.
That's what I do too. And it takes time, right? But you have to take that time, because I feel when you are here with someone, you have to respect their time, because this is going to stay forever.
Yeah.
That's the coolest part with these conversations.
And now 12 years in, the number of podcasts starting and new people coming in, there are a ton. So how do you set your content apart from someone else who's going to interview the same person? Yeah. It comes down to the preparation.
Yeah. Is it the same in relationships? Because when you go out and we talk to people, everybody has a nice shirt, everybody goes to the gym. Like, how do you set yourself apart to attract someone that you really want to talk to,
So a big thing, it comes down to your vulnerability and ability to share stories. Yeah. So one of the core concepts in our boot camp, actually the last day, is all built around heroic narrative building, so that you, as the hero in your own story, can share some vulnerability, some of your journey, and some of your goals, where you want to be aspirationally. And the more comfortable you can be with that vulnerability and sharing that story, the easier it is to break out of the small talk loop that a lot of us find ourselves in, asking the same questions, saying the same things about the weather and Santa Monica and the birds on the street, all that stuff that everyone just, is on autopilot. Yeah. And breaking out of that autopilot for a lot of us is sharing something about ourselves and being connected and being present in that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, the human interaction. And do you believe that you need relationships to be happy? Like, what's your opinion about that?
The science is in, and I'm not one to debate or argue science, that loneliness kills. Yeah. Loneliness leads to the depression that we're seeing in these crazy suicide rates. Flip side of that is purpose and meaning comes from connection. And there's that famous Harvard happiness study that delves deeply into this exact thing, that the more connected you are, the more focused on community and relationships you are, the happier you are. And listen, life is not just about happiness, but there are a lot of amazing things that happen to you physiologically when you feel connected to someone. Yeah. When you get that oxytocin, when you get that dopamine, and you get that serotonin for the right reasons. And a lot of us, unfortunately, are getting that artificially stimulated through our screens and sometimes through substances. But human connection, there is no replacement for when it comes to our happiness and well-being.
Yeah, but how do you make those day-to-day decisions? When you're sitting at work, you're working on this amazing project, your boss is like on your ass, and you're like, I gotta go home to my family, but I gotta finish this too. And I know there's a lot of people that will say, yeah, my family can wait a little bit. And that hour turns into, weeks and months. And all of a sudden you're sitting there with a divorce and say, what the fuck happened? Like, how do you make those decisions when you have to make them, if you know what I mean?
Well, it starts with creating habits around the life that you want to live. And those habits become behaviors that ultimately become your character. So that means figuring out in the morning how to be more productive. understanding that you need a hard out and a boundary in your life, and you don't need to bring work home. You don't need to be 24/7 on. And I know it's difficult in a space, especially in the startup community, as a youngster who's starting their career, to see all of your coworkers doing that. And even the perks of unlimited vacation, they're showing that people are taking less vacation because of that, because it's so hyper competitive. But your productivity is tied to your happiness and well-being as well. And science has shown that if you are not able to unplug, your productivity, your performance suffers. And you look at the most successful people in the world, and they wall off and guard their time for education, for reading, for learning, for deep thinking. You can't do that if you're in the hyper 24/7 turned on, I have to be in front of my computer world. And there are always going to be decisions that need to be made. But these decisions influence your character. Do you want to build an amazing family, or are you solely focused on your career successes? And some people find meaning in that, but many of us are not going to find meaning and purpose in that. We're going to come back to our families, to our homes, and that's really where it's going to come from.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
But it's a struggle. I'm not saying it's easy by any means.
It's so hard. We just look at the statistics, right? It's like the core, I think it's partly like the core values we have, or I think most people have their core values, but they have a hard time like always following them. Like with everything else, right? I'm going to start writing a book, I'm going to go to the gym. Like, how do we work to carry those habits day after day?
So oftentimes, when you think about the habit, whether it's a good habit or a bad habit, you take a step back and there's a trigger for that behavior. And for some of us, that trigger might mean the second I walk in my apartment and I'm done with a long day, I grab a donut. Yeah. For some of us, it might mean I turn on the TV. For some of us, it might mean I go for a run. The difference between those three people is that first action when they get home is primed by something, whether it's the refrigerator is next to the door, their gym shoes are next to the door, or the TV remote is next to the door. So you need to look at your behaviors, especially the behaviors and habits you want to change, and think about what are the triggers that are leading to this. Is there stress that is leading to me making this poor decision? Then I need to think about mitigating that stress, or allowing myself, by putting the gym shoes next to the door, to make that decision as easy as possible. And for me, I really focused on my physical health over the last couple of years. I had a health scare with stress and cortisol and high blood pressure, and my dad passed away of a heart attack, so heart health has been really concerning to me. So talking to my doctor was like, okay, you got to make big changes in your diet, and you got to make big changes in the way you deal with work stress. And that meant, okay, I need to carve out space for physical health. I need to carve out space to make better decisions around food. So for me, that meant removing all snack foods from the house and removing anything that involved processed food going in a microwave, and making sure that, okay, if I know that at the end of the day I'm going to be stressed and I'm just going to reach for whatever's in front of me, then I got to have Instacart deliver a bag of apples every Monday so that the first thing I see is that bag of apples. And it was the same thing with the gym. It was, you know what? I know in the morning there are a zillion things on my mind, and there are a number of excuses to not go to the gym. So putting my gym clothes out, ready to go when I wake up, it's the first thing I see. And now it's just become routine. I'm putting on my gym clothes before I even brush my teeth. And okay, well now my clothes are on, I'm that step closer to my end goal. Yeah. So, we had Charles Duhigg on the show, Power of Habit. He dug deeply into the science, and we had a great episode around habit building. And for most of us, we're trying to break bad habits, but we don't realize that you can't break habits, you can only replace habits. And the replacement happens around that trigger. And we can't remove the trigger, we have to mitigate the trigger and understand what is the trigger in order for those behaviors to happen and change.
That's huge. And I'm curious, I wrote a book about goal settings, so I'm curious, how do you work with goals?
So, love the book Traction, the entrepreneurial operating system, all around building out quarterly goals, rocks, and then breaking it down into weekly activities that will get you closer to your goal, and then doing a 3-month assessment of, okay, what goals did we meet, what goals didn't we meet, and then placing another set of goals 3 months ahead of you. So that essentially your year is broken into quarters. I've done that in the business, had success with it, and now I've been looking to do that personally. The other thing for me is now, and this is something that I learned from Mark Zuckerberg, was setting a big audacious goal for the year. So last year it was running a half marathon. I'd never done a half marathon. I'm not a runner at all. When I met my girlfriend Amy 5.5 years ago, she had just finished a half marathon. So she was on that high. We were talking about it when we met. And, flirty AJ was like, I would love to run a half marathon with you. Well, took about 5 years, but we ended up running the half marathon together. So I've always tried to attach now a big goal on my year that's personal and professional, that have allowed me with the quarterly goals plus that big goal to feel accomplished at the end of the year.
That's awesome. And how do you deal with having all these expertise and knowledge in your own relationships? Do you have performance anxiety because of that you have to be awesome at this, or like how does that work?
Well, without a doubt, the name The Art of Charm allows people to view every behavior of yours through a very critical lens. So it has set the bar high. And it's been a lot of work, and there are certainly moments where I'm charming, and there are other moments where I'm not charming, where stress or whatever has gotten the best of me. But that said, for me, I'm trying to do the best I can every single day, and not looking at it of, okay, I have to impress this one person, or I have to do this one thing. It's just, how can I show up and do the best that day? And the other side of that is self-compassion. And that's what a lot of us struggle with. And we had Dr. Stephen Hayes on the show talking about this exact thing, that in order for you to deal with your anxiety, you have to, one, recognize that anxiety is normal, other people are feeling it too, and there are going to be moments where you fail in your goals, where you let yourself down. And expressing compassion and celebrating the effort you put in and not just focusing on the result are how you can build up that temperament to withstand those moments. So yes, I've certainly put pressure on myself with the naming of the company and the podcast to be as charming as possible. But I feel like over the last 12 years, I've worked really hard to accomplish that goal. And it's something that I continue working on, which I think is why we're all in self-development, why we're listening to these shows, trying to learn.
No, I agree. And I think it's also, part of the human experience to be able to be vulnerable and say like, okay, I'm this guy from The Art of Charm, but I still have my bad days, and that's normal because we all do, right?
Yeah.
And I only have 2 more questions.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna let you go because I know.
Well, I wanted to add one more thing there that I think all of us can take away from it, and that's just constantly learning, and that's the platform that the podcast has provided for us. Every month we have a theme, and we delve deeply into the science behind that theme. So as we talked about habits, Johnny and I dug into the habits. Science, building it, talked about it ourselves, our own struggles and vulnerabilities there. Then we bring on an expert, and then we try to answer our listeners' questions. And that's created space for me to keep learning and trying to improve in these areas.
No, that's awesome. And I encourage everybody to keep learning all the time, right? Grow or die.
Exactly.
So I want you to imagine you're 87 years old and you're sitting in a rocking chair. I don't know if it's in Hollywood Hills or New York or Malibu or whatever your dream destination is. And you're just kind of contemplating about life. What do you want to have seen to be able to say, wow, this was a good run?
So, for a lot of my clients and listeners of the show, they're still shocked to see me teaching the first day of boot camp and see me engaged with the clients, because a lot of people view the success of the company and its growth as, okay, I have people under me now and I'm removed from that. But I love that process because I know how important these social skills were for me to find happiness, quality relationships, and hopefully not fall into the same trap that my dad fell into in terms of choosing the wrong people to surround myself with. So what I love is unlocking people's potential through teaching them advanced social skills and how to communicate more effectively and ultimately be vulnerable. So when I look at my legacy that I've hoped to create with the audience we built on the show, the clients we've worked with online and in person, is allowing them to have the skills and tools to find their own happiness and build their own quality relationships. And, we have a refrigerator at the office full of the thank you notes and the stories from our clients who have gone on after the program to do amazing things. And I'm constantly connecting with all of our alumni. We have events all over the world with alumni. And just last week, I grabbed drinks with a client that I'd worked with 10 years ago. And, when you think about self-development courses and trying to improve yourself, there are so many out there, and there are so many courses that any one person can take. And for me, my legacy is knowing that clients that I've worked with 10 years ago, 12 years ago, still look at that week with us in Los Angeles or New York as a transformative experience. And that's what I want to look back on my life. And maybe we'll reach 10 million. You have such an amazing goal. I love it. But I look at the behaviors and the results in my clients that have changed. That's the impact that I'm looking for.
That's beautiful. And I'm just kind of thinking about my dad, who's my karate sensei, and he gets these emails or people coming with flowers like for 10, 20 years ago, and like, you shaped some part in my life,
Yeah.
I got like my confidence to go after my education, or like, and he gets so happy, and he always says that's much more important than learning like how to kick and punch, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And the last question is something that I ask all my guests, because we're all about sharing journeys, and today has been so many tools. But what should people listening or watching this podcast do right after to get a little bit closer to their dream? What would be the best tool you can give them?
Well, a big part of any dream is fully visualizing it. And a lot of us, are being pulled in all these different directions, but you don't realize this important tool you have upstairs, your brain and the power behind it. And just sitting and deeply thinking about the goal that you have and what that success looks, feels, tastes like. Like, if you reach that goal, what will that be? And sitting there and really visualizing it so that your mind can actually wrap its head around it and see it from every angle, that crystallizes the goal and allows you and your subconscious to fire ahead with so much momentum that the goal is more attainable. And whether it's, for me, I was trying to learn how to play golf, and we were doing visualization exercises, or even in business with my business coach, we do visualization exercises around, if we reach these goals, what do I want to look, feel, and think about the business? And a lot of us aren't spending the time deep in thought around the visualization. We're just sort of like, okay, well, this would be a cool goal, and that would be a cool, oh, this person said this. But until you can really think truly about what the end result is and feel it and visualize it, it's going to be a lot harder to attain.
That's huge. And in order to do that, you have to take your phone out and put it away, right?
Turn off the TV, close the laptop, and just sit there in your thoughts and think about the sensations, the emotions you'll be feeling if you reach that goal. What will be the outcomes? How will the people around you view you? All of those things really power your subconscious mind to reach harder, to push through those moments of self-doubt, those moments of regression, those moments of failure.
Yeah, that's awesome. And even though it is scary to leave your phone, please do it. And I mean, even sometimes take a walk without your phone, right? It can
airplane mode.
Yeah, airplane mode.
I'm a big advocate of airplane mode. Turn it on airplane mode and just allow yourself a moment to not be so connected.
Yeah. AJ, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your journey, everything you have learned. It will help a lot of people, and we are super grateful that you have this amazing company called The Art of Charm. So if people want to connect with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, open up your podcast device, your podcast software, and search The Art of Charm. You'll find us there. You can also go to theartofcharm.com. If you're looking to improve your social skills and you want a simple, fun challenge and tap into our community that we've built at The Art of Charm, you can check out theartofcharm.com/challenge. It's 10 days all around understanding where you are, setting some social goals for yourself, and really stepping outside your comfort zone.
That's awesome. And we're going to share those links in the show notes, so everybody, you can just click and get over there right now. And thank you guys for listening to this episode. It means the world to me. And as I told you many times before, I want to help at least 10 million people to go after their dreams. But for me, every person counts. That's just a number. You are the most important person to me right now. So if you like what we do, share this with someone so they also can take advantage of this amazing conversation we just had. Thanks again, and catch you guys next week. Bye-bye.